So we are Mental Health Group C. I'm Jillian, and in the group is also Shabrit, Hannah, and Lavoisier. And we chose to focus on specifically test-taking anxiety. So this is a graphic that you can find on the CDC website, and it was from the third week of June, June 24th, and it discusses and shows the first 2 weeks of June. It was a survey that was passed out to adults over the age of 18 in the US. And so it kind of asked them about within the last 2 weeks, how we've been feeling, and a bunch of questions about substance use and mental health related questions. And these were the findings. And it's kind of alarming to look at and to see how high these numbers really are, and just to see how widespread these mental health issues are, especially during a pandemic and a time of social distancing and just everything being closed and all of that. So we came to our problem, which was test taking anxiety, which has been kind of exacerbated during the pandemic because everyone is taking kind of tests alone, and they just kind of don't necessarily have the resources of being on campus that they used to. And it seems like the pandemic is the only thing we talk about these days, but there are other important topics that need to be discussed. And so we came together and decided to come up with a small scale social plan with the hopes of helping at least one person during these unprecedented times. And we initiated a conversation with a total of 20 UC Berkeley students regarding mental health and specifically test taking anxiety. And we found value in focusing on test taking anxiety because one's mental health consists of many small components. So prioritizing small things can have a big effect on someone's overall mental health and can alleviate negative symptoms. And Hannah has the next slide.
Okay, so especially at a competitive institution like UC Berkeley, we've all come to know the tension that builds up weeks, days, or moments before an important exam. Test anxiety is a real issue, and we can really take a toll on our mental health, especially as students. And we've limited our social action target to be specifically among our peers, undergraduate UC Berkeley students. As students ourselves, we were able to seek among our peers to test 20 subjects, and with Jill and Lavoisier being juniors and Shabrit and I being freshmen, the subjects we chose range from both upperclassmen who may have experienced a lot of test-taking anxiety already in college, as opposed to freshmen like myself who may be coping with it for the first time. We believe that test anxiety in a lot of ways thrives off of attitude, because the word anxiety today has so much of a stigma around it that kind of reflects personal weakness and may go a much more serious direction with like therapy or medical assistance. We think that like this is just there's a huge stigma around anxiety, and in the case of test anxiety, it's so frequent and almost inevitable in the design of our educational system, being validated by tests. So people normalize test anxiety and overlook its appearance among mental health, which is why we believe that people aren't already doing what we want them to do. Through our social action project, we seek to influence this attitude of normalizing test anxiety by accepting it to be a facet of our educational system, and rather encourage UC Berkeley students to recognize their stress as a legitimate issue by showing them that there are ways to cope with test anxiety. In conducting our experiment, we could see that this attitude was a major reason why people weren't already seeking healthier ways to cope with stress, specifically among our second experiment, in which people recorded the way that they felt having tried stress methods before taking a test as opposed to no methods at all. We noticed that 8 of the subjects had used the words like fine or all right when using no methods, and then using like prepared and calm to describe how they were feeling after using de-stressing methods. In addition, we can see that the average of all 20 subjects' initial scores without having utilized any de-stressing methods were about 2 points lower than the average after using after using de-stressing methods, showing that these methods did indeed help. Through our experiments, we can see that our influence in encouraging students to try de-stressing methods in both like improved their attitude and their scores itself, validating that they might have not paid much attention to their test anxiety prior to the experiments.
Jill, you're muted. So what we decided to do for our project slash experiment was we gave each individual 4 copies of a math test, and each one has all 4 operations, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And they were instructed to do one of 4 things before the test, which was nothing, or to squeeze on a stress ball, go on a 5 to 10 minute walk, or kind of tell yourself positive affirmations and kind of possess a more positive attitude and being conscious of that. So we gave them 1 minute to answer as many questions correctly on the test as possible. And these were the results that we found.
Okay, so after the students used the techniques to help their test anxiety, they figured out how helpful these techniques were when dealing with their anxiety. So we told them that even after our experiments were done, that they should still continue using these techniques because it does help them with their anxiety. Um, our first test compared to our second test was very different. I feel like the first one was not so organized and our data was very messy, but that's okay because our second experiment, our second test was much better. Um, we got our data, we organized it much better. So overall, like it worked out, better. Um, our test, in our opinion, was successful. We got to influence students to take time before their test and use these techniques to help their anxiety. And that's what we wanted, specifically test anxiety, and that's what we wanted. What we really liked about our results is that it was unique to each student. So each student liked a different technique, and that's okay. And we got to talk to them one on one and like figure out which technique they liked best. And that's um, what I really liked about this experiment was just like talking to them and like how like seeing that every student has their own preference. I think for our experiment, it definitely wasn't perfect, and I feel like one thing that didn't work well was trying to interpret the data of the results and trying to come to like just one conclusion, looking at the results. And I feel we don't know that it was like just okay. Looking at the data, we have the participant list, and then we have the scores out of 20. So what participants 1 through 20 did nothing, and these are the scores. They walked, positive self-talk, stress ball, and these are the scores. Um, I feel like since a lot of the people did good on almost like every test, it was hard to come to a conclusion to which technique was best. But we do notice that when the participants did nothing, the scores were just like much lower than when they did the technique. So from that data, we can conclude that like doing these techniques helped their anxiety, which resulted in the better scores. And so in the next table, we have the participant list again, and then the preferred technique. And so this is the data that I really like because we got to talk to each student, ask them which technique they liked, why they liked that technique. And as you see, these results are honestly spread out. There's a lot of walking, positive self-talk. There's not a lot of people that preferred the stress ball, and I wonder why that is, but that's how it worked out or happened. And yeah, but moving on, next time we would like to take what we did right and what we did wrong and essentially prove on and use that information for the next experiment. Our goal was to help anyone we could, and even if we did help one person or all 20, we are happy to make that impact. I feel like next time we could work on changing up the test a bit, maybe making it more challenging, or we could let each student pick which technique they want to do and just do that technique. So yeah, but we really wanted to make sure that the students or the participants felt the most comfort when doing these experiments. And yeah, so I'll move the presentation along.
We tried to reduce the negative effects of test anxiety among UC Berkeley students to encourage healthier ways of coping with test anxiety. We learned that these effects have gone unnoticed. Though we considered ourselves somewhat read on the topic, there were certainly times when we thought someone might be suffering from the effects, but found that that wasn't the case. We also learned that the addressing and diagnosing of this problem is not entirely the problem of the surveyor or doctor because there were certain participants who admitted to knowing of their test anxiety yet chose to let it go untreated. Our solution was effective, in our opinion, and from it we learned that it could be strengthened by a larger sample size from the UC Berkeley student population that we scoped per our HMU. But however effective our solution was, we learned that it was but a part of a larger, more complete solution where every technique is allowed into and attempted in our experiments. This was our thinking due to the instances where we'd notice a student become immediately uninterested upon looking over our limited selection of techniques, leading to yet another learning experience, that is, that the participants wanted to kind of be impressed. There were other times when students hinted that maybe we were giving them too much credit, or no, putting too much responsibility on them to have had this thing noticed, at the least, and checked at the least, which is odd, but a learning lesson nonetheless. Unfortunately, in the end, that is when the experimenting was over, we realized that we might influence just one single person. This got us thinking, if there was a way to keep this information flowing, what would that way look like? And it made sense to us that this way would look like the university promoting people and creating spaces where this kind of information can be disseminated properly. All in all, we enjoyed this experience. We started with a problem that we were unsure about, and as a consequence, our solution yielded generalized results where one could tell that we weren't making people do what we wanted them to do. But these errors led us back to the drawing board where we were able to focus in on our problem, creating a solution that we believe influenced somebody. And that's gonna wrap it up for the group.
Thank you.